Hi everyone, welcome to our live webinar with Wix Answers and Deloitte. Today we're going to be talking about knowledge management as a catalyst for your organization's success, and we have a lot of things to discuss, so I'm excited. We're going to wait a few minutes for people to join here today, and we're going to start with a poll question for everybody who's just joining right now. These polls are going to be live, so basically feel free to vote. And we're going to be able to see those replies, and then Inbal and myself will be able to talk those through. So until we have everybody joining us here for the first few minutes, feel free to start with the posted here, which is how mature is the knowledge management activity in your organization? Is it very mature, somewhat mature, very new, or we have no knowledge management, which is something we're going to be talking through today. We're going to just give this a couple minutes, see people joining.
I'm already curious to see the answers.
Yeah, I know I am too. Should be very interesting or very polar, I feel. Okay, interesting. There we go. So we have the poll results in front of us, and we see that 52% of you have voted that the knowledge management within your organization is somewhat mature, followed by an even split between very mature and very new. So I think that's very interesting. I said it before, like they could be polar, so that'll be interesting to talk through. And 3% of you said that you have no knowledge management. So that's something that's probably going to change after today's webinar.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Okay, so to get started, I'm being joined today by my friends at Deloitte and at Getty Images. I'm Naomi. You may have seen me before with Inbal in a webinar that we did a little while back, or myself and Darren as well. I'm the VP Revenue at Wix Answers, and I'm joined by Inbal, Director of Knowledge Management and Remote Work Lead at Deloitte. And we're also going to be talking to my friend Darren Van de Voort, Product Manager of Media Services at Getty Images. So just a couple of reminders. We're doing this webinar format just a little bit differently than we've done before. It's actually going to be live, and we're going to do engaging sessions throughout. So a couple of things. Use the chat. I already see some people are. So definitely engage there and comment or ask questions. And we're going to be doing 2 more polls throughout this webinar. So we've done 1, and we're going to be followed by 2 more. We really want to hear what you have to say. And Inbal and I are going to talk through those as well. Okay, so for our agenda today, it's packed with a lot of things that we're going to run through. We're going to first just basically set the baseline by talking about what, the intro to knowledge management, then what is knowledge management? How do we define those goals and strategies within our different organizations? And I think for anyone joining today, we know that knowledge management definitely has a lot of barriers and obstacles to get these things in place. So we're going to talk a lot about that. And then we're going to have Darren show us a live demo of how Getty Images uses their knowledge base within the organization. And we're going to definitely leave some time for Q&A. So what is knowledge? Inbal, this is going to be a question that's directed at you right now. Let's start by asking basically, what is it? How is it perceived? How do organizations refer to knowledge? And what should basically be the focus areas of knowledge management?
Great. So I think it's a great question to start from. So to be honest, knowledge can mean many things to many people, and it depends on what we're talking about. And to understand what is knowledge in the context of a business organization, we first need to know what the organization wants to achieve. So I think in other words, we can say that we never, ever manage knowledge just for the sake of managing knowledge. It always has to promote something concrete in the organization. It has to be feasible.
And we're going to jump then, I think, straight into a poll question. Is that correct? To basically see how you guys feel about that as well in terms of what is knowledge management within an organization?
Yeah, I'm really curious to know what is our audience, how do they look on the goals for knowledge management for them?
Okay, so we're going to give you guys a minute to kind of read through this, but we're really curious to hear as well, because we hear this a lot in terms of what is knowledge management and, you know, what are some of the most important goals that you have within your organization. So we posted a question for everybody in the audience. You can select up to 3, and I won't read through all of them since everybody sees them, but we're going to wait until people are going to fill in their replies, and then we'll talk through some of the most important ones that you are voting for as the management goals. Okay, I'm voting myself, so I'm gonna just take a moment here.
I hope it's not, you know, considered cheating.
You make a good point, Inbal. Okay, so I think we're just about wrapping up that poll right now. So we should be able to see the results in a moment here. Okay, there it is. And I'm assuming that everybody can see what I am seeing. Okay, so very interesting. We have the leading, which is the leading reason, or I mean, the leading management goal that we have right now, which is very interesting, but also, I guess, obvious in many ways, is just to improve overall efficiency. It's definitely something that I know you and Inbal, you and I have talked about in a previous webinar of ours, and what does that mean within different teams within an organization, followed by prevention of lost knowledge and promoting business continuity. After that, we have increasing information and idea sharing, definitely one of the things that we've talked about as well. And again, it's interesting to see an even split between preventing reinvention of the wheel and improving the decision-making process. And we have the lowest one, which is to meet compliance standards. So Inbal, what are you making of these results?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. And, you know, from my experience with my clients, we have mainly 2 main views for knowledge management, or agendas for knowledge management. One is more about promoting a business agenda, or something that is focused on the strategy of the business. And the other one is more from the perspective of risk management and risk mitigation. And I can see here that it's pretty much the same also in this quiz. So those 2 angles will stay with us when we talk about knowledge management.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's interesting to see as well, because, you know, on preventing the loss of knowledge and, you know, that talking about that business continuity is obviously very, very important intrinsically. I know we talked about that, the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic knowledge. I think it's also very interesting to see that the operational efficiency can also be both, right? How do you operate both internally and externally with your customers from a knowledge management perspective? So these are definitely interesting. And if anybody in the audience has any questions through these, feel free to post, and we'll be able to talk through those later when we get to the Q&A session. So now, Inbal, talk to us about defining knowledge management strategy. I know that's obviously a big topic in and of itself in terms of like, how do I focus and what is really the strategy and how do I go about doing it?
Yeah, right. So now that we know the main goals for knowledge management, and as I see in the chat, of course, we have many more. So I would like to speak about the thinking behind how we are building or structuring the knowledge management strategy for the organization. So there are 3 steps or 3 views that we need to consider. The first one is the business goal. So what does the organization wants to achieve? That we will take and then we will translate it to a knowledge management goal. So there will be a complete correlation between the two. And the third component would be to really define in a concrete way how we are going to achieve it. And I will show an example just to make it more clear. So here we can see an example of a customer that actually what they wanted to promote is the client centricity. This was their business goal. And then they wanted to translate that to a knowledge management goal, and it was to increase customer satisfaction. And then thinking about how to achieve it. And there are many ways to achieve customer satisfaction through knowledge management. But their focus was on taking the internal knowledge management and make it accessible for external use. So the customers of the organization were able to reach the knowledge independently in self-service, and they had another channel to approach the knowledge of the organization. It was the same knowledge with small adjustment of the internal knowledge base. And this is how we tie the tree. So we have the business goal, the KM goal, and the way we achieve it. Another example is another customer that wanted to improve the operational efficiency. As we saw before, this is one of the common knowledge management goals. And then from a knowledge management perspective, the way we translate it is, for example, to prevent the reinvention of the wheel. If we are not repeating the same mistakes and repeating the same efforts for the same thing, we can improve the operational efficiency. And the way to do it, the way to achieve it, was through implementing a strong search engine that just the employees were able to get to the right information at the right time. And then by that, achieving the knowledge management goal and also the business goal.
I think it's really interesting as well. When you look at the business goals, we talk about, promoting client centricity. That's a massive undertaking in and of itself for any organization. And when you start to think about the ways that either even employees, so intrinsically within an organization, or your end users or customers want to interact with you, it's a pretty well-known thing that, 90% of people want to be able to self-serve or find answers to their own questions. And that's a huge aspect of that engagement, both within a company and with your brand. So it's definitely interesting that from what we see in terms of the data, that only about 10% of your customers will actually take the time as well to open a ticket or to send you an email or chat you up. And that's what we call the very vocal 10%. But the remainder of that, which is, about 90% of people who just really want to find their answers, and that kind of centricity on I am getting the answers that I need right here and right now is obviously very, very paramount in building out those business goals. I think also just really interesting before we jump to the next poll is on the achievement part of what you just talked about. It's an interesting idea to take that internal knowledge and then also make that available for your customers. So it would be interesting to hear from the audience later how many people are doing that, or what are the thoughts around that practice as well. So I guess everything looks good on paper, right? We agree about the strategy, but now how do we do it, right? This is obviously something that's very, very challenging and difficult to put to use and to bring to life. At least that's what I hear. This is great. We understand it in theory, but how do we really start doing this? And before we jump into Inbal and I talking about that, we are going to put out another poll to see what you feel as well about knowledge management barriers. So this is going to be the last one for today. And basically, we want to just better understand what are the most significant barriers that you experience when it comes to putting your knowledge management in full effect within your organization. And I believe that this question as well, you can select from one to all of them, whichever ones resonate with you the most. So we'll just give a few moments here for everybody just to vote.
I believe that some people here just want to choose them all.
Yeah.
Okay. In some cases, it is pretty challenging.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure for the knowledge owners within an organization, it's going to be at least 5 of these selected. Not that we're trying to bias any answers here. Okay, so we'll give this another moment to wrap up, and then we'll look at the poll results. Okay. So interesting and not interesting, right? I was almost waiting to see this. In a way, it confirmed a lot of what we know, right? So the siloed effect, that isolation of, compartmentalized department knowledge is very interesting to see that 51% of you feel that each business unit basically operates alone, and there are lots of distributed KM initiatives within an organization. That's interesting, and I guess not surprising in many ways, which is, you're going to have your legal teams, your BI teams, different teams, obviously all communicating different knowledge initiatives independently. And then after that, we have lack of incentives. So employees are just not that motivated to share their knowledge. And very close runner up to that is basically just lack of technological capabilities, inefficient UX, weak search capabilities. And I think what's interesting is this is a little bit more of a concentrated poll. We don't have like a loser here per se, and like the single digits. It's interesting to see also that 30% of you are saying that leadership doesn't understand the importance of KM, which I know we hear a lot of that as well. And then employees seeing knowledge as power and reluctant to give it up. Very interesting. So Inbal, what are you making of this? I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think that we see here, and this is again something I'm hearing a lot, and people, when they are concerned about the knowledge management initiative in the organization, whether if it's something that is already operating within the business or whether if it's a new initiative, there are two main concerns as I see it, and one has to do with a technological standpoint, so the technological capabilities, the search, all kinds of components that maybe work well or less. And the other angle is in many cases a cultural one. So how do I make people share knowledge? How does the processes look like? So the technological aspect and the cultural aspect are always the main concern in terms of knowledge management. And this is where we should focus. When we are trying to solve the problem, we need to understand where does the key of the pain point, where does it lies, and then to focus on how do we mitigate those barriers or those risks.
And I think there's also another angle as well looking about this, is that it's a combination of many of these factors coming together. It's almost always compounded. I'd actually be really interested to see the poll after in terms of seeing how many of the replies were also multiple issues. Like how many people actually selected one or two or selected all five? Because from what we hear a lot is that it's a lot of different issues. It's the lack of leadership, the lack of team sharing, the lack of in any sort of initiative within the organization. So it definitely seems to be like a very compounded problem. Also followed by the fact that it's not usually something that's very initiated from the beginning of an organization. And it's almost like if it's not broken, don't fix it. And only when things are really broken and there's a lack of knowledge and there's a lack of, communication between teams or users as well, problems there in terms of customer centricity, customer experience start to really surface, then it's like, okay, maybe we should start really visiting knowledge management and how do we do this? So I think that this is definitely like a very interesting very interesting question and interesting replies, which leads us right now, Inbal, to talking about the key areas for successful knowledge management and how do we put those in play?
Yeah, sure. So our experience shows that if we want the knowledge management activity to be successful and sustainable, we need to make sure to include at least those three components that we see here. So the first one would be to identify a business sponsor, someone preferably high in a hierarchy of the organization, someone that can send the message across the business of the importance of knowledge management. And the second aspect is understanding how does knowledge management operate within the organization. Do we have a knowledge owner, someone in the business that is responsible for knowledge management? And then how does it look in terms of the other functions? Do we have moderators or champions in the different business units that are also dedicated for knowledge management? And also considering what is the role of the end employee, the entire group of employees, what do they do in terms of knowledge management? And understanding how this governance model and operating model looks like is very important. And the last aspect is to identify what motivates people to contribute and share knowledge. And here we need to know what is the culture of the organization. So if we build a recognition plan, for example, it needs to be of one that is relevant to the specific culture of the employees and the entire business. So identifying those specific motivators can really, really assist.
Yeah, and everything will really start with number one, right? I mean, once you're going to have that executive level sponsorship, and there's like a fundamental understanding of how really important and critical this is for us as a business and as an organization. A lot of the other things that you talk through right now in terms of, you know, defining the governance and what is motivating people really kind of falls in line. It also talks to the lack of leadership, right? Or incentivization that we talked about on the earlier slide when we did the poll. And we're going to have a recording as well of this webinar. So for everyone who's, you know, tuned in today, and for those who didn't make it, this will be obviously a great way to also take it to top leadership and say, like, you know, this is something that really, really matters. And this is something that businesses are talking about. And they only understand it when it's usually broken. And so if you need our help, and Bala and I are here to help communicate and strengthen that idea that you really definitely need that business sponsor within your organization.
Yeah, I think another thing that is important to note is that knowledge management is something that has a start in many cases, but it doesn't have an end. So for the third component, at least, and also in some cases for the first and the second, we will constantly need to make sure that we have those three components, even if we already have a knowledge management activity in the organization. It sometimes needs adjustment, it needs to shift, and we need to make sure that it's constantly working for the business. And also the business or the knowledge management strategy that we talked at the beginning, this is something that also we would need to address at least once a year and see if it still fits the organizational strategy and make the adjustments. So this is a creature that is always evolving. It's constantly alive.
What do you think would be some of the main reasons, before we move on to like the next subject, that that there's usually like a lack of initiation or sponsorship from a C-level? I'm curious to hear your thoughts there, and I'm happy to weigh in as well. It could be largely from what you just said, that it's like a never-ending project and lack of ownership within an organization. But I'm curious if you can maybe shed a little bit more insights on why this is something that really needs to start being championed from the very beginning with, you know, preferably like a C-suite.
Yeah, I think that many of the leadership in the organization or the C-suite are not completely aware for the advantages of knowledge management, what it can bring for the business, or the way that it can really be tied to the business. And this is sometimes the reason it happens is because we have knowledge management, or we have a knowledge management technology, but we didn't think about the strategy behind it. We didn't actually have the full understanding or on how it's going to be operated, or why. You know, why are we even bothering to do knowledge management? And I think that this is why I can see sometimes those initiatives grow from the bottom. So someone within the business understands the way it is going to actually support the business and help the organization. And then they would bring it to upper level of the hierarchy and find a sponsor. So in many cases, it can start from the bottom, but without them, a responsibility from above, and without having the backbone for the entire activity, that can be quite challenging.
Yeah, it's definitely a grassroots effort that starts within the organization. A lot of different departments, teams starting it, and then how does that come together collaboratively? I'd also say, and I think Inbal, you and I touched about this last time when we did a webinar together, is also like that the industry itself is changing, and there is this understanding that this is really, really critical, not only in terms of how companies operate internally from efficiency, knowledge sharing, visibility, and just knowledge retention and all of that, but also extrinsically with how companies and brands are communicating with their with their customers or their end users. And especially probably now during COVID, which everybody can relate to, that we talked about how so much of this is pushing remotely, and how do we overcome the challenge of now not only communicating remotely, but making sure that we're communicating in a very efficient way between teams. So everybody's feeling it at some level, which I think has put a lot of emphasis on something that has always been a subject that companies have talked about, but now it seems a lot more pressing to businesses to really quickly figure out this part of their business from a knowledge management perspective.
Right. So, couple of months ago, if I had a question as an employee, I could just approach someone next to me and ask the question. And now people need to work more independently. They need to rely on a certain wisdom that is not next to them. It's not reachable. And this is why I think the importance of a strong knowledge management presence, and if it's a platform or a mechanism within the organization, I think it makes it even more crucial this time when we are unable to, informally consult with other people. We need something more sustainable to rely on.
Which actually now leads us to our next topic about self-service, which is something that I'm very passionate about talking about. And I think it's interesting that we just tackled that from like the business org perspective. And if we look at businesses now, especially now when so much of it is remote and customer behavior is changing, businesses are adapting. I hear a lot of times, hey, we had to make this and this changes, or we changed our subscription model. And there's so much change and trying to adapt to these times that the implications of that are, how do we serve our customers? How do we communicate with them? How do we make sure that they get the level of service that they need? How do we know what they need, right? And anticipate that before they start talking to us. And all of that really sums up into self-service. I know, especially if you think of any sort of service that you have, whether it's food delivery or shopping or education as of recently, or any of like the businesses that are more booming. And even if there are businesses that are more struggling, let's say on the travel side, everyone is just trying to figure out how to communicate better with their customers. And you'll oftentimes see, you're going to visit a business's website or their app, and you're going to see, hey, we ramped up now our business hours, from the contact center. So we're going to be available now 7 days a week versus 5 days a week. And there's a big effort to just be there. But a big part of it really just comes down to self-service and making sure that our customers and our users get the information that they need when they need it, because no one really wants to spend time on the phone waiting for a customer care rep to answer them, or to go through a really frustrating process not to get the answers that they need. There's been a huge, huge focus on self-service today. And we're going to be joined by Darren from Getty Images, who we've actually done a webinar with before, and we had great feedback and questions from that. And Darren is going to walk us through how Getty Images uses knowledge management within the organization. But before we actually dive into the full demonstration of what Darren is going to show us, we're just going to wait for a second here to see Darren. Hi, Darren.
Hello there. Good morning.
Hi, welcome.
Hey, good morning.
Thanks.
Good to see you again. Before we dive into it, Darren, because I know what you do and obviously what your team is doing at Getty Images, maybe you can just share like a few words with everybody who's tuned in today in terms of like who you are, what is this project about, what are some of the goals and the strategy that Inbal and I talked through that you were really trying to achieve within the larger Getty Images. And I think that will help give a little bit more context for the audience that are about to see what you're going to be sharing with everyone today.
Yeah, sounds good. So yeah, my name's Darren Vandervoort. I'm a product manager with Getty Images in the media services department, which is focused on a few different of our products. The main one that we'll talk about today is Media Manager, which is our digital asset management platform. It went through a pretty big evolution this year, which we'll talk about. It used to be a product that we owned and did the development for ourselves, and made the decision last year to find a leading partner in the industry to partner with to help us really bring this product forward in terms of features, functionalities, integrations, things like that. And so we found a partner, Brandfolder, who's one of the leading DAM providers in the industry. And with that, we're able to really completely reinvent our product. As part of that, also included knowledge management. And so previously, knowledge management in our legacy product was kind of more static PDFs where it took a lot of time to update. It took development resources to kind of put those back into the product. As a workaround, our account management team would create sort of offline knowledge management training booklets, almost tiered to individual clients, which is good to get that sort of personal touch on there, but also a lot of work and not really scalable. And so part of what we needed with this new solution with knowledge management was, self-service, which we talked about, so that, I basically built this whole thing myself, and I'll show you how that works. Easy to customize, easy to brand. But the main thing that we needed was support of localization. So both Getty Images and our product are, used globally. So it's not just, English only. We have customers all over the world. So localization was really important, and it needed to be easy. And we really got what we needed with this product to be able to do that. So go ahead and I can show what this looks like now. If there's any other
perfect.
questions.
Thanks for that, Darren. Yep. Definitely give some more context. So now I know you're going to be sharing your screen and showing a live demonstration of how you and your team have built this and used that at Getty Images.
Okay, so this is what the front of it looks like. So again, really easy to customize. Just seeing this for the first time as a customer, it looks like a Getty Images page. You wouldn't even know necessarily that this is coming from Wix. So as you can see on the top, it's hosted on our domain, that damhelp.gettyimages.com. This is externally facing if anybody wants to go look at it and kind of poke around the articles and see. But again, this was really easy to set up, easy to brand, easy to customize. I love how easy it is to kind of highlight these sections. We just added this what's new as a way to kind of highlight new things that are released every month. So I'll soon be working on the October what's new. But nice to just highlight some of the top articles that we see. And these are easy to shuffle around just kind of based on what I see within insights that customers are searching for. Super fast and responsive, so I can look for different types of things. I love the kind of type ahead just to kind of see. It supports grids, images, videos. Sometimes we've used all those in different cases. But again, what's nice is that if I'm a customer here and I don't speak this language, I can shift to what I need and easily get to that.
Yeah, I know, Darren, at least I can say some of my people might say I'm a little biased, but you're definitely making the Wix Answers knowledge base look very, very good here, right? So
yeah, like maybe not everybody needs these languages, but it's and we don't have necessarily customers in all these languages, but what I love is that it's ready for them. And really, I can talk about the translations a little bit.
Yeah, that would be great. I know last time we actually talked about that, and it actually is one of the topics that comes up under that umbrella of knowledge management, especially for multinational companies that have customers or internally different languages. And I know that was something that you really took on as quite a big feat when it came to that multilingual aspect.
Yeah, so let's maybe shift now. I can go back and forth, but I'll show you what sort of the back end of this looks like. So this is the admin view of Wix Answers. And again, before I get into the articles, I'll just show again how easy this is to kind of set up and design. So it has, a few templates you can start with. which is great, just kind of based on how you want to, present knowledge and the high level categories to your customers. Super easy to brand. So again, Getty's colors are predominantly purple. So I was able to use kind of the exact text color there and some of the primary, secondary clicks, things like that, easy to add logos. As you can see with the content on the main page, it's all separated out by these different languages. So each one's sort of its own separate entity. But again, once you're in there, easy to really see what you're doing. If you have people that speak the language, it's great to do that. I did a lot of Google translations to get this going, but we have members on my team that speak, roughly 6 of the languages. So it was easy to do a first pass, but then make sure that somebody who speaks the language is able to give it that final polish and make sure that it translated correctly. And again, the articles and the categories are kind of the same way. So once you set it up the first time in the default language, it kind of automatically carries through to the other languages where you just need to update for translations. I'll show you some articles here to see how that works. So again, this is the article view. We have 85 articles now and growing. Every time new features launch, or again, starting now with this kind of what's new, trying to show what was released every month. Really easy to just continue to expand the knowledge base. Let's see if one of these has some translations here. So again, this is the initial view, the default view being English, how I put it in the first time. It's a WYSIWYG editor. Really easy to add different types of content. I love how you can have these anchors here that show that on the left where it's easy to jump kind of straight to sections. I link to the images and that allows that to carry through to the other translations. Really easy to do. This one doesn't have video, but you can host video as well. And then in terms of translations, I hope this is a new article, so I don't know. Let's see if there's translations here. Yeah, so Wix Answers is connected with another provider called Crowdin. And once you do that integration, it's basically you go into Crowdin and put in the API key. Then when you submit the translations, it syncs to Crowdin. I use the machine learning part of that instead of human translators. So it kind of goes through a combination of both Amazon and Google, and then you just approve that. And then once that's done, it syncs back. And so this is what comes back after that's done. I have a few of the members of the account team have access to Wix Answers as well. So if they speak the languages, I usually leave these in a draft mode so that they can go in here and make any updates and approve it. And again, that's really valuable if you're able to have that sort of final human polish, just because I don't always trust the machine learning to do it. So that final polish is really important if you can do it. But again, if there's other images, things like that, it should all sync over. And then for the ones that can approve it, they can put it to that publish, and then it goes out to the knowledge base from there.
We got a question from the audience, but I think you've somewhat answered that, but we'll just quickly ask this one and then we can answer it now. The question is, how are you managing content between internal customer service and external self-service? Are they seeing the same content, and are you duplicating content or tweaking it for each end user? That was a question for you, Darren.
So all the end users see the same content. The main difference would be just the different languages. So there's not, if you look at the main page itself, it's separated into different types of users. So, if you're an admin or if you're just a regular user, this isn't protected by a firewall or anything in terms of who you are. So we kind of open it up to everybody.
Yeah. So definitely that's been something that you guys have taken on from a language perspective. So not everything is created equally across all the languages, but just to answer that question as well from the internal external side, it's definitely something that can be easily done with this platform in terms of controlling what is information that is seen internally for employees and what do you show externally. And even more than that, if you have a certain subset of users or customers that you only want them to see some kind of content versus the other kind of content, I guess in many ways, Darren, like you're doing with the languages, that's also something that is a part of like the core functionality of how do you make sure that the right content gets to the right people. So I hope that answers the question that's being posted here.
Yeah, and I think Wix Answers does have a way to kind of lock it down if you want to. We wanted to keep this open because it's a nice way to send links of articles out. You know, our sales team can point prospective customers here if they want to get a sense of how the system works. So, you know, it could be a feature, but, you know, we chose not to use it. It was kind of important for us to leave it open to everybody.
Yeah, and I guess it largely depends on like the strategy of the company. I know that many companies, like you said, prefer to just have it like one content for all. Everything is really pretty much created equal. And then there are some that have very specific subsets of content, you know, that a premium user can see, that a VIP user can see, that a user who's using a specific product can see. So it really depends like how granular you want to take that in terms of like messaging. And there's no right or wrong. It just really is largely dependent on the business strategy and that form of communication. I want to ask you a quick question. I remember we talked about this as well. Okay, we have a question, so I'm going to hold mine for a second. We have basically a question: is it compatible with screen readers? I'm trying to, are we talking about iPads and tablets?
Or is it like speech to text, maybe? I don't know.
So we'll come back to that in a second.
I mean, it is mobile optimized, if that's.
Yeah, if that's what's being asked, then it is. But we'll give that person a moment here to reply to us. So I'm not sure, but I'm basically just seeing like accessibility. Not sure if that's like standards.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be more of a question for you or your dev team, like how much of accessibility it supports.
Yeah, fully accessible is what I say in the really like simple Wix Answers does support like full accessibility and is 100% mobile ready and compatible. So I hope that answers the question. If not, then feel free to like hit us with a more specific question. We'll be happy to answer. Darren, I know when you and I talked about this last time, and Inbal and I chatted about this just earlier in this session, there's an overwhelming feeling of like, how do we start tackling this and how do we really get this down? Okay, we have our executive sponsor, we get the strategy, we've defined the goals, we really understand it, but it seems to be a very overwhelming feeling of like, where do I start? And I know that this was something that you talked through as well, like, what am I focusing on? What is like the first phase? And then those KPIs, and there's a lot of learning as well as you're going along. Can you maybe talk to a little bit about that? Just as well to share some of your experience in building this out within the organization?
Yeah, but I think the main thing to start with is just know how you want to organize and categorize the data. And so with those, 85 articles that we have, like they kind of fall into these high level buckets here. So being able to start there to know, we happen to, we have this getting started guide, which is great, but we primarily separate it out by kind of regular users of the system versus admins. And so we know as new articles come in, am I talking about something more on the admin side? Like, how do you set this up? How does it work versus how does an end user see it? And so I can kind of break that into from this organization view, where do I want the articles to go? And then separately that's, integrated with, dozens of other platforms. So I can put all that here in terms of, this is what you need to do to go to Adobe and do that integration. So, having that organization in the beginning, I think would be helpful. It also helped me to know, like coming from Brandfolder as the partner, they also had a separate knowledge base. So I was able to kind of use theirs as an initial guide to see how they set it up. We also do our own articles and things separately from that, but just seeing how they did it and knowing that they have been doing that for so long was a good way to sort of wrap my head around, what's the right way to do the organization structure on our side.
Okay, and we have, Darren, another question for you. How do you keep your knowledge base up to date? Who addresses / revamps older articles and how often?
Yeah, so initially it was just me. So, a lot of work to be able to take that on myself. But we have, I think, 5 seats in here. So I've just started to train other members of my account management team to be able to take that on themselves and write new articles. And that's been a ton of help, just kind of taking that off of my side. The other thing that I do kind of periodically is go into insights. So one of the features here, when you look at the knowledge base, is seeing what customers are actually clicking on. Kind of super helpful just to see, improve the ROI of like, yes, we've had 2,000 customers in the past, past 90 days use this. So really helpful to see. But you can also see what they're clicking on, what they're searching on. So here, unanswered searches, if a search brings no results back. And so I looked at this a few days ago, and this brand guide is one that we're actually starting to build out an article, because I can see that users are trying to find, knowledge on that we didn't have yet. And so I think this is really helpful, just staying close to what the customers are doing. If there's any, I don't see any of the there's a few unhelpful ones here. So at the bottom of the article where you can vote to see if it's unhelpful or not. So based on this, I might take a look at the user permissions page and just see, like, if I'm looking at this for the first time, what might be unhelpful, and just update it based on that.
Okay. I mean, this is pretty amazing. It's not trivial as well to share with everybody here, like some of those performance metrics. What's really interesting as well, as you mentioned, like the ROI part of it. And there is a tendency to look at knowledge as something that's just an article. I put it out, it's going to deflect, it's going to help, obviously, like people with finding answers. But there really is a big ROI driving factor here in terms of these 2,000 customers that you just talked about. Did they find what they needed? How do we help drive them down the funnel? Did we solve it? Did we not? And then what you talked about as well is like listening to the customer. What are we not telling them that they need to know? So there's very big business questions around this, beyond the fact that this is obviously just a tactical way to put out information and to create articles. So I think that's it's very interesting that you've touched on that.
Yeah. I also see too that, like for this example here, people looking for user permissions 186 times potentially might have gone to our account team 186 times to ask for help. And so like, that's where the self-service and the scalability comes in that we're, teaching them how to find the answers themselves.
Okay. And there's one more question here, which is just a general one that was posted in the general chat, I believe. We'll answer that one. And then Inbal and I, we're going to move to like a full Q&A. So just really quickly, there's a question here about where the article is stored. Is this on Wix or is it on a different platform? So there is sometimes a little bit of confusion between Wix and Wix Answers. Wix Answers is really its own independent platform, a customer support platform that actually supports Wix at scale. So we use it internally at wix.com for all of our knowledge base, for communicating with all of our customers around the globe. So when you're actually going to be creating a knowledge base with Wix Answers, you're doing it on a very different platform that is separate than the larger Wix. And essentially it is going to be hosted on Wix Answers. And for everyone that has heard us say this before, it's really a platform that can do anything from startup, so a few articles that I need just to get up and running and help self-service, to like full-blown scale of tens and tens of thousands of articles and more than 20 languages supported. So I hope that answers that question. I saw that one pop up twice in 2 different windows. So with that, we're going to conclude the session with Darren. Darren, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure as always. I'm so happy that you had a chance to join me and Inbal for this. It's really great to see what you've brought to life and share a lot of that knowledge with everybody who's tuned in.
Yeah, I hope it was helpful.
Thank you, Darren.
Yep.
And now we are going to shift to the Q&A session for this webinar. I know that there's been a bunch of questions posted for us in Inbal. So we're going to run through eight of those questions and see how much time we have to run through them. Okay. So the first question that we have is, how does knowledge improve cross-functional team communication? Do teams that use knowledge ever get siloed understandings from teams that are not using it? Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
I'm going to let you start with this one.
Thanks. So yeah, it's a very interesting question. And I think it has to do a lot with culture, or what we're trying to make the culture or drive to. So in many cases, we would like to change the perspective from knowledge is power to sharing knowledge is power. So when you share knowledge, it has prestige with it. And I think that in terms of silos, our methodology speaks of trying to eliminate as much as possible those silos and make the information accessible to everyone as much as possible. And I know that different organizations, mainly security and others, has to have boundaries or permission and differ the access to the information. But I think that we need to minimize the places where we are using those type of restriction or permissions. We need to make it as flat as possible and use personalization mechanism just to not make knowledge overflow, but to have it accessible in case we need it.
I definitely agree with that. And moving on to the next question as well, we talked about this, is what barriers have you Inbal and Naomi seen as the most preventative or commonplace in an organization that are starting to scale their knowledge? Which is interesting. We talked about the barriers. I'll quickly weigh in on this one. The ones that I see really the most predominant ones are the technological side. So on a really tactical level, the inability to really execute and bring to life what you envision from a knowledge perspective. It's difficult and it's complex, it's outdated. Clunky seems to be a word that comes up a lot, and teams feel really binded by that inability to really move quickly and also create something very beautiful that they're proud of. So that's one aspect to it. The second aspect I'd see that I hear a lot about is lack of sponsorship or leadership within the company, but also like the secondary effect of that, of lack of consolidation in terms of KM ownership within an organization. Those would really be the two biggest aspects of what I see as barriers.
Yeah, I think that maybe another one that we still didn't touch is, maybe Darren was talking about it a bit, is the challenge to structure a complex forms of knowledge. So building the right content architecture is really what helps us to have a good search mechanism. It has to do with both. We need to first create the architecture, and then we're at the technological part steps in, and then we're able to search and find what we want, and also have personalization. So I think another barrier in some cases is the content and context, and we need to look at it also.
Yeah, and that's leads us to another question under that umbrella we're talking about, which is, the question reads, is the point of KM is always being alive creates a problem within the employees because it is never ending. Very true. How often would you recommend to initiate a KM project / improvement? And how would you prioritize KM practices when creating the initial standard and then maintenance?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I hate to give a routine or a specific date for that. I think that it really needs to be driven from the business. So the knowledge owner needs to be constantly attentive to the needs of the business. He needs to constantly have communication with his users and know where do they get the right service from knowledge management, and where it can maybe be improved. So I think it's mainly communication, and also combining the governance and the ownership together with being to be able to listen and to be carefully attentive to the need of the users.
Yes, and we also have a few questions around the risk of bias within knowledge management. How do you avoid or mitigate some sort of bias in the way you're putting out and creating knowledge? And I think that's also a really great question. And it's almost probably very leveled in terms of, are we talking about within a department? Are we talking about cross-organizationally? Are we also talking about for customers? It's really interesting because I can almost probably attribute a potential bias in any one of those different areas. What do you think, Inbal, in terms of when it comes to mitigating the risk of knowledge management bias?
I think it brings us again to the cultural aspect. And I think as much as we can send the message, and the sponsorship here has an essential role in sending the message, the right message of sharing knowledge is power, and then promoting just contributing and sharing knowledge, and eliminating the bias as much as possible. And also, again, communicating if you feel that you're not sure what would be the right approach. So to have discussions around it, to have champions or a representative from business, from a different types of the business, and together to establish the right perspective for KM in the business.
And that answers as well. We got a few questions as well about this, about, you know, how do you motivate employees and how do you increase this knowledge sharing within an organization? I would also say that apart from being ambassadors for this change within your companies and, you know, the projects or the teams that you're a part of, I would also say that sometimes coming with really interesting questions about what are we missing? What don't we see? What aren't we hearing? We actually came across as well a company that they were trying to be advocates for knowledge management within their company. And they came to Wix Answers. They got a small knowledge base up and running really quickly by themselves. And then they actually came with that as a form of advocacy to a few teams to show and to say, listen, like, these are the things that we could be seeing. This is the way that we could be, you know, like Darren talked about it, starting to form those categories and the hierarchies about the messaging that we want to communicate. So I thought that that was a very creative means of doing that. And like you said, it's also a huge part culturally, but a big believer of coming with those questions and maybe showing something could really help take it from a more theoretical conversation to an actual, you know, tactical way of doing something. We're getting quite a few questions, just going to go through here as well. We have a question about KPIs. I think this is interesting as well. Darren just talked about this earlier. What are the KPIs that are important to concentrate on when trying to optimize your knowledge base?
Yeah, I think that there are two main types of KPIs. The first one would have to do mainly with the usage. So we would want to see more engagement. This is a type of a KPI that we can rely on. We will want to see that people are finding what they need. So when we are monitoring the search results, we will want to see that we have high percentage of accuracy. And we don't have abandoned queries, for example, or queries without queries without an answer. So this is from the usage perspective. And then we have also the business one. So for example, if we can reduce mistakes, this can be an example for a KPI. If we can monitor and see that once we have launched the knowledge management system, we're able to show a reduction in compliance or regulation issues, or if we can see that we don't have as many mistakes as we had before, then I think this is one of the KPIs that is very relevant. And this is something you can also show to the leadership. So I would recommend go more towards setting KPIs that are related to the business and to the core strategy of the organization.
Yeah, and sometimes it also, you know, on a tactical level, it just start like, you know, Darren mentioned how this project got initiated within Getty. Just start, you know, creating that knowledge, putting it out there. And many times we learn by seeing that our users actually care about something else, like you know, unhelpful content or searches that they're looking for that they're not finding. Sometimes like that very tactical knowledge just helps you to learn as you go along. So setting those KPIs are definitely important, but also sometimes just getting started and understanding, just let's put something out there and then see what are the results that we get back. We have time, I think, for one more question. We have here a question about ownership within a company. And the question reads, curious about how knowledge management is being handled within multiple teams under one company. Do you have a high level from each team handling their own info, or one overall manager of the content for the entire business? This is a very interesting question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's no one suit that can fit all. So the governance model needs to be relevant to the specific organization, and we need to understand whether we have a couple of knowledge owners in the different business units, or do we have one that is responsible for knowledge management cross-organization, so it's enterprise-wide, and it really differs between organizations. This is one of the, I think, challenges to understand what is the right governance model for this specific organization.
Yeah, you're right. It definitely depends on obviously the organization, and it also starts obviously with that sponsorship. So start with those grassroots efforts, talk to different departments, talk to different teams. Those projects tend to be a lot more forward moving when there's more of a collaborative nature. And like Inbal said, I agree with you. It definitely really depends on the governance of that organization and how they do things. So I hope we got to most of the questions asked today. I know that there are a lot of interesting ones. We will be posting a recording of this session and hope that it helps everyone who tuned in today to get this moving within the organization, and understanding what are the things that they need to focus on, and learning from the experience as well that Darren brought to us today. So thank you very much for joining us. Happy that everybody could make it today, and we'll be talking some more, I believe, Inbal.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, bye everybody. Thank you.
Bye.